That looks like we're live. Nice indication there. Let me see if it reflects online. My people. It's your boy, Adi Licking. I have been working on this project. Boy, you talking about effort. Your boy has put in some effort. And we're going to keep on working towards it till we get it to work the way we want it to work. Looks like the live, well, according to my console here, we're live, but not seeing evidence of it that we're actually live. There it is. All right. Awesome. Greetings. This is your boy Adi Licking. And I want to check my sound. Yeah. All right. Learning how to set this thing up. I think recently I did another live, or attempt to do a live, and it was complete. I mean, it felt good. It seemed like it was rolling well. I used all my equipment accordingly, but didn't have any audio. But now I've been practicing with these tools and working so that when I do the show the way that I want to do the show, like the way that I really want to do the show, like everything will work out without a hiccup. We won't miss any of the good things that we're trying to do. Like currently, it's just me. I am one of those guys with dreams bigger than my windows. Have you ever heard of this idea before? Have you ever had dreams bigger than your window? What do I mean by that? Dreams bigger than your window, right? Well, it's a dream, something that's on your mind, something that you just are insatiable about accomplishing. But when you think about it, like when you actually set forth to do it, it's like, wow, like there's aspects of this that I can't immediately see in my view. Like when I look out my window, can I see all the pieces of this dream? Like there's aspects that I know that are involved in this dream, but can I see them when I look out my window? That's what I'm talking about, dreams bigger than your window. As a matter of fact, I wanted to kind of support that idea and that theme. This is an amazing artwork, amazing shirt. This shirt was produced by these guys called Langston House. And this particular shirt, they call it the Indigenous Dream Merchant. Indigenous Dream Merchant shirt. Oh, when I saw this shirt, I absolutely fell in love with it. I was like, okay, it's a lion wearing a headdress. Like, this is me all day. The artwork was fabulous. And when I talked to the guys over at Langston House and I heard their story, I immediately resonated with these brothers. And I was like, okay, these are the kind of guys that I need to connect with and promote what they're doing, just simply not from any like real strong business sense. I'm not promoting them that way, just simply because I personally love their artwork. I love what they're doing, and I love the basic idea of their story. These guys started together as a group of recording artists back in the 90s, and over time they've transitioned from simply recording artists into graphic artists and an entire brand of very high quality, wear, very high quality clothing. And that storyline resonated with me because I too am a jack of all trades. I'm one of those persons who has dreams bigger than my window that requires me to pull in skill sets and talents and desires and visions that don't always seem to match up right off the rip. You know, they seem like they're doing different things, but until you pull them all together and deliver it to the world, that's all you'll see. All you'll be seen as, you know, scattered ideas. And sometimes that makes things complicated to share ideas with other people, because your ideas are bigger than your explanation for those ideas, you know, and everyone's not gonna share the vision. Everyone's just not going to share the vision. They're not always going to see where you're coming from. And even when people seemingly do, or I say seemingly do, let's say it this way. Even when you find folk that seem to line up, or even say they line up, it doesn't always work out. A lot of times people want to see and prove. They want to see you doing it. And as excited as they might be with you in your explanation of something that's really bigger than what you can explain, at least with me, I've learned that sometimes I'll have these ideas and I'll share them, and folk will be like, yeah, they'll be excited about my excitement, because sometimes my excitement can be contagious. They'll be excited about my excitement, but when it comes to translating that into execution, they're waiting for me to execute. And that's cool because it's my idea. But sometimes execution requires multiple hands, multiple heads, multiple hats. And always wearing multiple hats can be exhausting. It can be tiring. And it also makes your processes go longer. I just recently revisited one of my favorite movies of all times, and that is Back to the Future. Dr. E. Brown is actually Emmett Brown, but Dr. Emmett Brown, in the storyline, it took him 30 years. It took him 30 years to get the flux capacitor to work and to actually turn time travel into something practical. Well, not practical, but something actualizing his vision for time travel. Now, of course, time travel, you know, may not be something that any of us will actualize outside of fantasy storytelling, but I could relate to Doc Brown in that he had this amazing idea, and it took him. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't realize that I would be sharing that with Dr. Brown, other than the fact that we share a name, E. Brown. But the idea that it took him 30 years to get this idea that he was confident would work. No one else believed in time travel. Of course, you know, time travel, even to this day, is considered to be something that's just for fantasy and for conjecture. But Doc Brown had the vision, and he had a dream bigger than his window. And he set with that dream for 30 years, to the point where he even engaged in theft of plutonium from a nation. You know, he stole plutonium from Libya. Wow. Just to make his idea come into fruition. That is dedication. That is dedication on the next level of dedication, to see your ideas made all the way through. And I can relate to that. I've carried this idea for a while to start my own podcast. Now, I learned about podcasts from working in the cell phone industry. Like, I knew about podcasts, and before anybody really did, you know, as a technophile, I'm involved in technology and learning about keeping up with everything as it comes up. But when I learned about podcasts, I saw it as an opportunity. And when did podcast was announced? When Steve Jobs created the iPad, and that had to be 2000 roughly. When he invented the iPad, he gave us, the iPod, he gave us podcasts. And the idea of podcasts would be like radio shows that you could download onto your podcast and listen whenever. But the idea really struck a chord with me, because it's one of my long-term visions one of the dreams that I've had that was bigger than my window, I've had since the 90s in my youth, was that one day I'd own a radio station. I always wanted to own my own radio station since I was a kid, since I was about 15, 16 years old. One day I'm going to own my own radio station. And then in 1996, while I was in college at the University of Texas, I started looking into the process of actually owning a radio station. What would it take to start a radio station from scratch? I could buy a radio station, but that requires a lot of capital. What would it take? So I started doing the research. I even worked at the radio station at the University of Texas, Austin, to kind of get my feet wet, to kind of get an idea of what it takes to be in radio. What is the equipment like? What is the setups like? And it got me exposed to a lot of what I'm doing now, audio engineering in particular. So I studied audio engineering at the university's radio station, and I started the process of learning how can I start a radio station. Called DC in 96. Yep, I called DC and come to find out that 1996 is when broadcast radio was deregulated. They deregulated broadcast radio, and that was the point where it made it nearly impossible for a small person to come in and get a new radio station. The deregulation process made it where corporations was gobbling up small radio stations, and not only were they gobbling up small radio stations, they were gobbling up all of the open licenses as well. Single entities or small groups of entities buying multiple radio stations. There's something that was never allowed before, because before the deregulation of the radio in 1996, it was set up to where radio stations would be local, and that would be so that the politics and the messaging of a local market could stay congruent within a market, and it wouldn't be you have these big monopolies that you do today in radio. But today we have them. But the cool thing is that the alternative to those have popped up through the internet. Like broadcast.com came around and made it easier for broadcast radio to actually get on the internet. And then after that, you started getting all of these really cool social media applications that are still largely owned in a handful of hands, right? Like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. Amazon is owned by a single big brain at the top kind of thing. And so we still have quite a bit of that. However, it still makes it a lot easier with these platforms like Amazon, YouTube, Facebook, for someone to create something brand new and reach an audience and create a platform and have a platform, create an audience and get their messages out and share what they have to share. And so that is the continuum of me going from my big idea of owning my own radio station to building up the idea, reverse engineering, so to speak, the process of creating my own stories and making them available through some type of broadcast means. And here we are today. Here we are today on a podcast. And even now, I'm using this multi-camera system, which is absolutely fascinating to me that how this system works, right? It's really cool setup. It uses the iPad. I'm using the iPad as my main controller. The iPad controller allows me to switch in between cameras. There's a couple of other really cool things that you can do, picture in picture and that sort of thing. Still setting those up. They call them scenes. You have different types of transitions. We can do a mixed transition that blends the images from next to next. We can also use what they call a wipe transition, which swoops over and wipes away what was there before. But it's a really cool tool. Installs on the iPad, and it allows, through the iPad, to have multiple cameras that you can control from a single space, right? The software takes the signals, right? So currently, all of these cameras are talking to this iPad by way of the iPad's hotspot. So the iPad hotspots takes the signals from the other multiple camera, and then it compiles all those signals in through the app and sends them across through stream. And it also records live as well. So I say it records live, but it records live from each camera. So I have 2 satellite cameras, and if I were to set the iPad up as a third camera, I can record those signals, those streams independently, and then go back later and edit them and do things for a more refined look. I'm practicing specifically with the live aspect of it, just to get my feet wet into practice and to get this thing going. All right. But this is an awesome system. It allows me to bring in multiple mic sounds. I'm currently using this really cool mic. I will share it with you. This is the Hollyland. I think they call it the Lark 2. It's a really cool setup. This case is a charging case as well. I'm able to charge not only both of the receivers, both of the transceivers, the mics themselves, but also the receiver that plugs into the board. Is the receiver here. It has noise cancellation features built into it. Now this is designed where I could clip it on to my belt and work with it that way. Let's say I clipped it to my belt, and then I could run a cable to a digital XLR or whatnot. There's different ways to use the mics. I'm using it specifically plugging it into the mic in. Now this cool setup actually has 2 mics. So if I was interviewing a second person, I could set up a couple other cameras. I have a handful of old iPhones. Pretty much every iPhone that I've owned for the last few years, once it timed out and didn't work really well on the computer network, on the cellular network, it still works as a handheld computer. And so the software installs, works just fine. The cameras work, and that's how I'm using actually these 2 satellite cameras or iPhone 6. So just give you a sense. But I also have a couple of other iPhones for multiple cameras if I want to have additional cameras. This cool setup allows you to go up to 9 cameras, I believe. Yeah, 9 cameras, which is phenomenal. It also allows you to be able to take a feed in from your laptop. Now today we were supposed to practice as well with today with Clubhouse, and actually getting a signal in from Clubhouse, or taking this signal and working where we're simulcasting the Clubhouse and Facebook at the same time. Unfortunately, in my rush, I forgot the power supply to my laptop. Battery died in the setup process, so we had to skip over that. But nonetheless, we're set up to do that. The way we would connect, just for sharing purposes, I will be using the Find mixing board. Now this is a board that's designed for streamers and gamers. Allows you to plug it directly to your computer, take a mic in, a headset in, and get a nice feed directly into through your computer. What we'll do when we go live next go around is we'll use this device to get our audio from Clubhouse, right? Patch it into the rolling board, which is the aerial caster, and the rolling board will take the audio. And if someone called in on Clubhouse, we'd be able to take their call and patch them in directly into this system. Initially, when I first purchased this, I ended up spending a couple of additional bucks on studio mics and studio mic stands and that sort of thing. Using the wireless mics is so much easier, so much less of a setup. But if I needed to use the studio mics, they're here. I have them. Have my entire studio, my entire podcast studio in a box. And but for now, we're using the wireless mics, 2 boards, headset, and a handful of cameras. And now my window, even though my window has gotten a little bigger, actually my window hasn't actually gotten that much bigger. Time, right, between my original idea of owning my own radio station back in 1996, in this time period, time has created for me the opportunity to put smaller things in my window. So my dream is still bigger than my window, and that's to have this major podcast and doing all the fancy things. But the cool thing is that this technology that has come about has shrunk that down into a box that I can carry, that I got from IKEA. I literally have a box that I carry from IKEA, that I carry my 9 cameras, 2 boards, 4 mics, 2 sets of headphones, tripods, and clamps to handle my cameras in one box that I can carry myself. It's phenomenal what technology has presented us, or has presented me, in relationship to being able to shrink down what fits in my window, and still has given me not a bigger window, just smaller things in the window, but still the dream itself is far bigger than what I still have in front of me, right? Even the podcast today, the intention, like I mentioned, right? We wanted to set up. Well, I should have my computer here, right? I should have a whole board with a DJ and all kind of cool things we wanted to do in this practice, right? And that requires not only more equipment, make sure that you actually have the equipment you have available to you with you, like the power supply for my computer, that's available to me, just don't have it with me. But also people, right? People also make the difference. And once we, they'll be, like they say, build it and how does it go? Build it and the people will come. Build it and they will come. That's what we're working towards building it, and hopefully seeing more and more of the people involved. So that's a little bit about what we got going on in the world of podcasting. And since we're talking about podcasting, as a technophile, I'm always talking about technologies and how we're able to do the cool things we want to do using technology. The next time we meet, I run a podcast, and the next time I go live, I'll share with you some of the other technologies that I'm using, specifically the technologies that allow me to do more things. So this is part 1 of Dreams Bigger Than Your Window. In part 2 of Dreams Bigger Than Your Window, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about AI and how artificial intelligence is allowing us to do what these technologies is doing with podcasts I just explained. I'm able to do things way bigger than what I have right in front of me. Perfect example, I'll kind of give you a heads up about that. I have this vision for the infrastructure for this broadcast system, right? The infrastructure is very similar to what you already know as far as social media, right? Very similar in that regard. And although I do have an engineering background with network engineering, I have plenty of experience in network engineering and audio engineering. Also have some experience in engineering with building vehicles and that sort of thing. I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer by training. But what I am learning, and I still have space to learn more, whereas hopefully expand my window, so to speak, is in coding. Even though at once upon in time I was on track to be a super coder, I'm not. However, AI has closed that gap for me. Like, I can code, I can write code, I can give computers instructions and give it direction as far as I need to do. And they call that prompt engineering. A whole new space, perfect for a cat like me. It's not a hard thing to learn, prompt engineering, because ultimately in prompt engineering, you just need to be able to give the computer an idea of what it is that you need to do in a way that's not too loaded with human thinking. Just kind of break it down into small parts and prompt it properly in order for it to give it the output that you need. But it is also in part a good part in successful prompt engineering is knowing what tools to use and for what. For instance, if you are looking to build a video and you want to create something completely new with no animation skill set in particular, there are tools that you can use specifically for creating video that are more effective than your general tools like ChatGPT or Gemini, for instance, Google Gemini. You would want to use some of these more dedicated, more integrated design tools. But another major amazing tool that I've learned about, we call it Manus. I think that's the name, MANUS. And Manus is an amazing tool. So the next time, on the next version of the podcast, we'll talk about the tool Manus and how I'm using it to do more with less, to shrink down what needs to fit in my window, or in a sense, expand the framing of my window so that I can get more of my dream in perspective. Yeah. So I guess that's a good stopping point. That was a nice run, nice practice. I believe that I had it all worked out in terms of my sound. In terms of the video, I believe it's all. I noticed. Oh, I have a paused camera there. So that's the downside too about the technology is, it is technology. So it is bound to fail, or you're bound to have failures. So I'll work that out. That's a little kink. But that's good. I think looks like the camera froze. It's not a big deal though. And yeah, man, it's been an amazing experience. Thank you for checking in with me. And until next time,